Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. We are here with a brand new video talking about the many hand traps of the format. All these hand traps right in front of me are relevant, good, meta, viable as well. And I wanted to kind of rank them for you guys so you know what card is really good when, which deck, and talk about matchups, stuff like that. We're gonna, score them on versatility, viability in the meta. But we're also, of course, if a card is not that good, we're going to explain why. And we're also going to explain against what matchups the card is good and what isn't. So let's make a good, nice pow and start at the back of the deck. We're going to start off with the Fantastical Dragon, Phantazmay. As most of you know the effects by now, I'll read them out real quick. When your opponent special summons a link monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. Draw a number of cards up to the number of link monsters they control, +1. And then shuffle cards from your hand back to the deck, equal to the number of cards you drew, -1. So basically, your opponent summons a link monster, you summon a Phantazmay, you draw 2 cards, you do one at the bottom of the deck, you go +1 because of his summon, and you refresh your hand and draw better hand traps. Well, this card is really good and versatile, and the most important thing of this card is that it is a body as well. This card has seen a lot of play during the Settlement Grade format and the Sky Striker formats where it was really good. He also has a field effect, which is important, which is also valuable. When your opponent targets a face-up monster on your field, you can discard 1 card and negate the activation, which is also pretty good, especially in the Striker format. Nowadays though, this card is really good to draw other hand traps, like Nibiru or Ash or other hand traps that don't require field presence. And while this card is still really good and still has a place, one of the most important things to keep in mind that if you're playing against a deck like Noble Knights, their first link summon is one of their most important ones, or if they just summon a Hulk of Firebreaks, it is the most important one, and you will probably rather just stop that instead of, drawing hand traps after that and then go play. So while Phantazmay is really good, I kind of rate him as like the, the A tier, not the S tier. Because he is still really good and he draws into your deck. He's a consistency card for going second. For a going second deck, Phantazmay is especially really good. But for a going first deck, it's just not that versatile. Which is also a pretty good argument about him, like going second, it's way better than just going first. But in Ashes, like going second, still pretty good. Then, the next hand trap is Nibiru. And Nibiru is a card that bounces a lot back and forth. Sometimes he's really trash, sometimes he's really good. Right now in this format, this is probably one of the best hand traps to play. I will definitely rate him S tier because of the 2 meta decks, Dragon Link and the Noble Knights. And this is a card that you need against those decks. You need to remove their monsters from their field. If you don't remove their monsters from their field, they can just combo on. And I'm not saying they can't combo on after you Nibiru their field, because especially a deck like Dragon Link can easily combo on. Just 1 extender is probably enough. But this card can really make an impact. And combined with another hand trap like Gamma, it can basically destroy your opponent's entire board, which is why I'm rating him a little bit above the Phantazmay. This is definitely a card you want to draw with the Phantazmay. But Nibiru just has a really good place in this format because it's really good against meta decks. The only bad thing is it's not really good against Eldlik and certain rogue decks. But it still has a good place, and I definitely think it's S tier just because of the necessity against the meta decks. The next card is Droll, another card that bounces a lot back and forth. Droll is at the moment very good because there are a lot of Eldlik invoked Dogmatica decks running around. Droll is also really good against the Rocket Link deck. The only thing is that Droll is really, kind of dependent on the hand of the Noble Knight player if this makes an impact. Sometimes they stop, sometimes you win. And you win, and sometimes they just keep playing. There's really nothing Droll did. So this card has been back in the format for a while now. It's kind of matchup dependent. Again, against Dragon Link, it's basically win the game. But against a deck like Noble Knight, it's kind of, dependent. And there were a lot of rogue decks as well, which is why I'm going to rate it next to the Phantazmay as being really good, but maybe matchup dependent and just not as versatile or generic as the Fantastical Dragon Phantazmay. If you would main a card like Droll in a meta tournament 100%, but if you main your Droll at locals, it's going to be like, you're not going to be entirely sure if you're going to have a good time with it. Another card that bounces back and forth is Artifact Lancea. Artifact Lancea is back in the format again, especially because of a deck I haven't mentioned yet, which is Dinosaurs. This card is really good against Dinosaurs, basically ends their turn. This card is also really good against Dragon Link, slightly less so, in a certain way. But Lancea is definitely back to stay, also really good against Invoked. Definitely not main worthy, but definitely a card to keep your eye out on. I have been citing it for a while now, and it's just really good against decks like Eldlik as well. You can just shotgun it in the standby phase, there is no extravagance. So definitely an A tier hand trap at the moment, just not main worthy, and definitely worthy in the side deck. Then we have Didi Crow, a card that has been back for a while now as well. And yeah, this card is really good against Eldlik, this card is good against... It's okay against Dragon Link, certain matchups, certain times. It's not that good against Noble Knights, but it's really good against Rogue. For example, last Wednesday I went to my own locals in Spellemere, and we have a lot of meta players there, so this card was not in my deck. Then when I went to Leiden, and there were a lot of zombie players there, and then this card is suddenly insane, and it's just really good. In this format, it's, you know, it's kind of dependent on your own local, which is why I'm going to rate it slightly lower, because it's just not that versatile against the meta decks. You cannot stop an Infernoble play, basically. Because you just Didi Crow, they will always just continue playing. But this card is really good and you should not sleep on it as well. Then we have Ash, and I'm gonna take a small leap and say that this card is not that good this format. This card just doesn't do enough. It's one of the best, most generic hand traps, definitely A tier. But it doesn't, you know, it doesn't stop, it doesn't remove the body on the field. A card like Gamma, which is just most of the time, Ash is a really heavy card. It's just most of the time better than an Ash, because, you know, Ashing Isolde still leaves the body on the field and they can still combo off, and Gammaing the Isolde removes it from the field, which is one of the best comparisons in my eye. This card is really good against a deck like Eldlik or Invoked, you know, or decks that run Extravagance or Pot of Desires. And Ash still has a place in the meta. It's just, you know, maybe you shouldn't main this card. Maybe there are better hand traps, especially in a meta, you know, in a meta-based local, like where I go. Ash just doesn't do the cut anymore. But if you're playing against rogue decks, stuff like that, then Ash is definitely worthy the main deck. But, you know, it's kind of dependent. Are you expecting a lot of Eldliks, then definitely main Ash because Gamma is dead. If you're expecting a lot of meta decks, just run the Nibiru Gamma instead. Hand trap that I should mention, because we are listing off variable hand traps, is Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter is probably the best hand trap in the game ever. This card basically stops turns, ends plays, and ends people's lives, but there's a certain cost to that, and that is that you cannot play on your own turn. So this card is only really good in certain decks, only good in certain matchups. And basically, if you're a Grand Magus player, you should run this card, and if you are not, then you should probably not. There are just way too less decks that can, you know, actually manage to play this card and not, you know, die themselves. A deck like Scepter can easily play it, but then again, you have to draw it, which is why it's just such a weird thing and such a different card than any other hand traps. Meister, which is a card that you can discard when your opponent activates a card in their graveyard. You can send this card from your hand or and to the graveyard to negate that effect. I wanted to mention this card as well because it's also really good. A card that gets compared to is Bell as well, but Bell is just slightly different. This card just negates any activation in the graveyard, which is good versus decks like Eldlik, for example, which is why I wanted to mention it. It's good against like an invocation activation in the graveyard. I'm not sure if you want to Skullmeister that. There are certain, you know, this is a card that you should keep in mind, but I don't think it's a card that you should play. But I wanted to mention it because it has, you know, it has applications in the meta, which is why I wanted to talk about it real quick. Then we have Effect Failure. Effect Failure basically lost some popularity because it is a monster effect and it's only during the main phase. And this card got kind of power creeped by Impermanence. This card is still really good. It still has really good, you know, matchups. But the difference basically is that, you know, you can also Impermanence in your own turn, which is just better. And Impermanence is just overall a better card. If you really want to run more infinite Impermanence, you can run a Failure as well. Which is basically what the Handtrap Eldlik deck did. They mained 3 Failure, 3 Impermanence, because Failure was just a good card. It's still a good card, but it's just not as good as infinite Impermanence at the moment. Then we have Ghost Reaper. Ever since this card got released, people are always like on and off if this is the best card or the worst card in the game. The effect is during either player's turn, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can discard this card, reveal one card in your extra deck, look at your opponent's extra deck, also banish all cards from the extra deck with the same name as the card you revealed. Your opponent has 2 warriors on the field, you have no monsters because you are going second. You can discard your Ghost Reaper and banish Isolde from their deck if you're playing Isolde in your extra deck. This card requires setup. You need to, have room in your extra deck to counter the meta as well. This card definitely has a place. But honestly, in my honest opinion, I don't think that this card was ever really good, especially right now. If you are playing against Infernoble and you remove their Isolde from play, it will only make a Hulk Vibrex and you're even further from home. If you Reaper their Hulk Vibrex, which is one of the most generic cards you can Reaper, they probably still have more plays as well, and this card has to be timed, it has to be correct. If they have certain extenders, they could just play around it. I don't think this is a format for Ghost Reaper. There's no format for Ghost Reaper, because essentially the card is just a -1 and doesn't deal with anything. It's basically hoping that you will stop your opponent's turn, which is really not something that you should count on for a Handtrap. Except maybe Droll. Coming up with some spice as well, Gnome Material, which is another new Handtrap from Dark Neostorm. If your opponent special summons a monster while you control no cards, you can discard this card, target one phase of monster your opponent controls. This turn that monster cannot be tributed or used as a material for fusion, synchro, XC or link summon. You can only use this effect of Gnome Material once per turn. This card has been waiting to be good and it's finally here. This card is really good this format. You can Gnome Material Isolde, you can Gnome Material Hulk Vibrex, you can Gnome Material Striker Dragon, you can Gnome Material the Dragunity Link. There are so many options right now in the meta that are really good for Gnome Material. This is a card that has been seen in the play in the LCS as well. This card is coming back and this card is here to stay. This card was always bound to be played at a certain time, which is why I'm going to rate it in the A tier next to Ash, Lancea, Droll, and Fantastical, just because this card has been coming back again and now it's finally good. I honestly am really interested to see in how many players will pick up on this card, because it's honestly really good at the moment. And yeah, definitely deserves its place in the A tier. Reason why it's not S tier is because of its restrictions. It's not really good if you are going first. And it's also, versus certain matchups, it's really difficult card. Versus a deck like Invoked, you can do it as under Mirage, but then you're like, yeah, what does it really do? And against Eldlik, it's definitely not really good. We have Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. Basically, for those that don't know this card, which is still a possibility, can the camera focus? Yes, when a card or effect is activated, it includes any of these effects, quick effects. You can discard this card, negate the activation, adds a card from the grave to the hand, special summons a card from the grave, banishes a card from the grave. Yeah, this card has seen some play in the past, but honestly it's just not good enough right now. What does this really stop? Basically LP or Invocation, but then again, if they have Meltdown, this cannot stop Invocation. It's just a little bit too niche, or it just requires a little bit too much setup for your opponent to actually be really good. This card alone will not stop your opponent. You need to combine this with another Handtrap. It's still pretty okay, but just not this format. I really do not have faith in Haunted Mansion in this format. If I'm missing a certain matchup or anything, but honestly, I just cannot really see a solid reason why this card would be really good right now. Then, mentioned before, Psy-Framegear Gamma. You all should probably know this card by now. When your opponent activates a monster effect, you can special summon this card and a driver from your deck, and then negate the activation and destroy it. While this card has a really big downside, that is running the driver in the deck, which is basically literally a vanilla and a garnet. This card is really insane. It deals with the body, which is important. It destroys the Hulk, it destroys the... what's it called? The Martial Metal Marcher as well. It destroys Isolde as well. It really restricts your opponents in, they really have to have good extenders in order to play, and they just cannot have, one extender and like Ash. This card is really good. The only downside is that it is really matchup dependent. But even then, it's also really just good to, Gamma an Invoker, or even if it's necessary, you can Gamma the Lord effect as well, which is why I'm going to rate this card right here. Opening Nibiru and Gamma is basically Exodia. Because your opponent will end on maybe a negate, you can just Nibiru, they will try to negate it, you can Gamma it, and then you basically win the game from there. Which is why I'm rating Gamma up so high. It removes the body, which is super important. I cannot stretch that enough. And yeah, it deserves to be in the S tier right now. We have Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. This is basically a third Impermanence. If your opponent special summons a monster face up, except during the damage step, you can discard this card, then target one of those monsters. Negate its effect until the end of the turn. Also, if that face up monster leaves the field this turn, its controller takes damage to its original attack. It's a Veiler with a little bit of bonus effect, but then slightly worse, because it needs to be on the special summon and it cannot be later in the turn. This card was run in the Outlook deck back when we were playing 3... what was it called? 3 Imperm, 3 Ash, and we were playing around 2 Moonlit Chill, because we could make Halco Fabrics with this as well. But right now, since Veiler is really not that good, I'm gonna place this card a little bit lower as well. Maybe there will be a format where Veiler will be one of the most impactful cards in the game again, and we need to run 3 Imperm, 3 Veiler, and maybe 2 or 3 Moonlit. Right now it's just not that time. A Moonlit Chill will not do enough this format, which is why I'm going to rate it so low. With Ghost Ogre, another card that is coming back. Let's take a look at the effect real quick. When a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell trap that was already face up on the field activates its effect, quick effect, send this card from your hand to the field or field to the graveyard, destroy that card on the field. You can only use the effect of Ghost Ogre's no red once per turn. This card is making a slight comeback. It's again really good to remove the body. If your opponent summons an Isolde, then it's really good to Ghost Ogre it when they use the first effect, which is why a lot of Infernoble players play around that. But this card is really high impact. It can destroy a lot of cards. As against Dragon Link, it's also really good because it can again remove bodies from the field. It can also destroy their field spells. Ghost Ogre is making a small comeback, which is why I'm going to rate it A tier for now. Just maybe a stretch, maybe it should be a little bit more down. But I have faith in Ghost Ogre that it will be back in the format, because it's going to be good against those matchups. Also, this card is a really good rogue killer versus things like Mech Knights or like Dogmatica, because they can remove the bodies from the field as well, which is just so impactful. Second to last, we have Token Collector. This card is really cool. If a token is special summoned except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from the graveyard if it was there when the token was special summoned, or hand, even if not. You can only use this effect of Token Collector once per turn. If this card is special summoned, destroy as many tokens on the field as possible, and if you do, this card gains 400 attack for each token destroyed. This card is really cool, being able to special summon himself from the graveyard as well as from the hand. If you want to think about applications, I think basically Link Cross. You can destroy your entire opponent's token board and they only have a Link Cross and a tuner. This card is definitely making a comeback. It's good against Auroradon as well. It was being played in the late format of the last, before the Banished, and it's kind of making a comeback as well right now. It's really good against both the decks that are top tier right now, which is why I'm going to rate it up in the A tier. It has some application requirement. It's not good versus Rogue. This is not a main deck card, but it's a definitely good side deck card, because it's definitely good, to fill up your deck with cards like these. I'm not saying it's the best, but I'm saying it's really good. The last Handtrap is an actual trap. This is Impermanencia Infinita. This is the Portuguese card that I pulled from my booster packs at YCS. Basically, this is gonna be A tier as well, or S tier as well, I mean. This card has so many applications. First of all, it's a trap, which means that it's not really easily negatable. This can auto Appaloosa on its own, which is really strong right now. It's better than Veiler at the moment. It's just so versatile. Also, it's a trap. It has an effect when it's set as well. This is just one of the best hand traps, one of the most utilityful. It's good when first, good when second. You can use it in your own turn if you need it, which is why this card is really good. It's good against Rogue, it's good against the meta, it's good against an Isolde, for example, as well, or just a Hulk. The only thing is that you have no cards on the field, which is why it conflicts with those, but that's honestly fine, because you can either keep this in hand, or you can, wait, and you can wait with your second hand trap and just imperm first. This is kind of my tier list right now. Again, a small summary right down on the bottom here. We have some hand traps that are just not as good this format, or just are not good at all. Right here we have some hand traps that are still good, but maybe need a little bit more utility. Right here in the A tier, You have some pretty good hand traps that are really good and definitely should be in your side deck one way or another. But in your main deck is really, you know, dependent on your local. And right here we have, in my honest opinion, the best hand traps in the game: Gamma, Nibiru, and Imperm at the moment. Imperm because it's a trap, Gamma because it removes the body, and Nibiru because it removes the field. Which is basically a small summary of these cards. So if you were having trouble with picking the hand traps for your deck, I hope this video helped you out. If it did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will make more discussion videos in the future about rulings, deck lists, stuff like that, so be sure to follow me. And yeah, do you have a big opinion about this as well? Do you think Meister should be S tier, or do you think Crow should be a tier higher? Leave a comment down below on what your thoughts are, and yeah, thank you guys for listening to me rambling, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!